Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of comics like Squire and the upcoming Confetti Realms. It's Nadia Shammas. Thanks for coming on, Nadia.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really excited to be here.
How's the day starting for you?
It's good. I feel like every day has been crazier than the last, honestly, this year. I don't know what's in the water this year, but it's been a really weird year, really busy year.
Is that from a work standpoint or just like a general life standpoint?
I feel like general life and work. I just feel like this year really zoomed past me, you know? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you do have... the magic about graphic novels is that like they appear in a shop one day and we're like, oh, wow, it must have worked exactly like a single issue comic. Like you writing Shadow Warzone must have been exactly like writing Confetti Realms. Mm-hmm. Probably not. You've probably been done with it for a very long time. And also you're like working on a video game in Thirsty Suitors. I have no idea how the timeline on something like that works.
Yeah.
The amazing thing is the work stuff you've been working on may have literally nothing to do with what we're talking about today.
No, I mean, it does actually. I mean, I feel like this year has been a lot of Thirsty Suitors. I know we're going to talk about that more. And it is coming out November 2nd. So I guess I'll say that everywhere. It'll be on Game Pass, on Xbox, on PlayStation, on Switch. Eventually it'll be coming to mobile. But yes, so that's kind of been a lot of my year. Confetti Realms took a lot longer than I thought it would. It took like years.
From a writing standpoint?
Yeah, because it was a project that started in 2020. So that is my pandemic book. My partner lovingly calls it my Bo Burnham's Inside.
That's pretty incredible. I now know that you got a pandemic cat and a pandemic project, so...
That's exactly right. I got a pandemic cat, a pandemic project. I was like... At the beginning of the pandemic, I was one of the people who just watched Contagion and Chernobyl a bunch. And I was like, I really just sat in it for a while. And then I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make myself busy and that'll totally get me out of this rut. And it didn't, I couldn't write. I genuinely don't think I was able to like properly write for like a year. And so everything kind of took a little longer. But Confetti Realms was the book that I was like, I think early pandemic was the time that I was spending the most time trying to figure it out. And then I realized that I couldn't figure it out because my brain just was not working the way that it normally worked. So it was the first book that I ever started writing without like any idea what was going to happen next.
Did you have like a plot outline or is it
kind
really
of.
You're just riffing?
I was mostly riffing. Confetti Realms was probably the first book I've ever done that was like mostly riffs. And I didn't really know. I think the thing that I didn't know, I knew the world and I knew the characters, but I didn't know what was going to happen to them at the end until I got there.
I mean, the good news is, as a person who has read it, I can confirm that they didn't know what was happening either. So you were in the same mindset as them. So
yeah, I kind of was like, I think that at first I was trying to really, really construct the world the way that I normally construct worlds, like for Squire or like even some of the work on Where Black Stars Rise. But like we'll say mostly Squire, that like I did like 6 months of like research and like hard work in terms of like how does the military work and like what is the geographical structure and what is the timeline of conquest in this fictional empire. But then Confetti Realms is like, this sentient puppet is like, collect teeth if you ever want to go home. and then they just kind of go from person to person attempting to collect the tooth debt. And everyone there is absolutely beyond understanding, just completely wacky. So I was really like trying to push myself to perfectly structure a world that was totally wacky and nothing made sense in. And then I realized that that's just not how it's going to work. So then I was like, okay, if I want to make like a truly wacky, nonsensical world, like this very ephemeral outer dimension place, I need to discover it as much as anyone else. So I kind of tried to then take that approach.
This is how you end up with a frog that stabs people for a living.
Yeah, that is how you end up with a frog that stabs people for a living, or birds that can imitate your crying face.
Oh, very scary. You know, it's funny. I actually, when I was reading it, I was thinking, I was just like, man, this really feels like you cutting loose in a way different way than Squire. Because Squire, Sarah Alfage, your collaborator on that book, took a trip to Jordan and to
Yes.
God, I forgot what the other
Or,
location.
I believe she went to Istanbul and Jordan.
Istanbul, yeah. So didn't just Google Maps it, went there for real research, and you
Yeah.
guys had repeated lengthy
Oh
conversations
yeah.
about your approach, and then like you get to Confetti Realms, and this is not to say it was any less effective at what it was trying to do, but like when I was reading it, I was like, this is just like Nadia riffing. This is
Oh
just like
yeah. Oh
fun
yeah.
and in your feelings and just
Yeah.
getting in there.
It is in many ways like a complete opposite of Squire in the sense that it is like very much not about structures necessarily and the way that they kind of bleed into these characters, but it is all about these characters' emotions, their relationships to one another. Like their emotions almost create their environment and reflect in the actual environment of the world, while Squire kind of has a world that is bleeding into the way these characters self-identify and are able to create their identities. Confetti Realms is a world that is like created around these kids and around the emotional turmoil that they are going through. And I did want to have this like big emo story about like Arab and queer and brown kids and non-binary kids that wasn't like about them being punished for their kind of experience or self-reflection, but just about them like figuring themselves out in like a very real, normal way. Like, what do I do when I graduate high school? Do I
Yeah,
want to keep living in New Jersey? Like, you know?
yeah. I feel like I was a really big emo kid back in the early 2000s.
Say,
I was really big in like the emo music scene. I would go to concerts constantly. I think people might be surprised about that with me because I just seemed like this orderly person. But back then, I was just like, I don't know. When you're going through that time, it's like you're a ball of emotions.
yeah.
And I swear to God, like in my head, all of a sudden I was like listening to like a bunch of Drive Through Records bands again in my
Oh,
head. I was like, oh my God, why is the early November playing in my head right
no,
now? This is
I
so.
was like, I have to say, my Confetti Realms playlist is probably one of the favorite that I've ever made on Spotify. Like, it is the most in your feelings, like just people in a garage screaming, I'm sorry for a full minute. Like, just like that is what I was listening to. It was all front bottoms, like just back to back.
I mean, you have to release this, right? It has to be a
Oh
Confetti
yeah,
Realms playlist.
I do have to release the Confetti Realms
There's gonna
list.
be a generation that's gonna really identify with it. It'll be people that are our age, and then it'll also be people who are that age right now, and they'll just totally jive with it.
Hope so. Like, I hope that this is like, I hope that's who reads this comic. I hope it's literally like people who are in the middle of big teenage throes. I want it to like how do I put it? So when I was a kid, I was actually really afraid of spooky stuff. Right. I was like, I would see a Goosebumps cover and I would run away. I was so terrified. But I was also really fascinated with them. And then finally, like, I would like stare at the cover and then I would get spooked and I'd be like, no, I can't, you know? And then finally, I got myself to read them and I loved them so much. I loved how weird they were. So after I finally got over that fear, so I do like, I think when I was talking with Mad Cave about it, I think I did say like this is more in the vein of like a Goosebumps or like a kind of like this is a like a spook or an Over the Garden Wall was a huge inspiration for me while making this. I wanted something that was like so weird and intangible, but like felt big. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I just have to say really quick, I actually did the same thing where you'd stare at like covers and just try not to spook yourself. Except for mine was I would go into the video store and I would look at horror movies. I'd be like Blockbuster just staring at like random slasher movies. I'm like, I could do this. Nope, couldn't do it.
I know, I've done that too. I was God.
The furthest I would get was Critters because I felt like I could handle Critters because they're little like balls of mean. And I don't know if you ever saw any of the Critters movies.
No,
They're
I
not very
haven't.
good, but they're also pretty spectacular. Anyways, but before we get further into this, I want to talk about your background because,
Yeah.
Goosebumps is a good recall for that, but also like your origins. I came across a quote from you in a TCJ interview you did with Sarah and with Tiffany Babb, where you described yourself as, in regards to your comic origins, and I quote, one of the ratty teens in Barnes& and Noble just sitting in the shelves with all my friends going through manga. I have to say, I was one of the ratty teens of Anchorage, Alaska's Borders books. I wasn't Barnes and Noble. I was very aligned with Borders until it went out of business, at which point I had to move on. But so I really appreciate your origins, but I do think that those bookstore origins are a lot more common than people realize. Like, it's just, even if you go in now, like my wife and I will go after we go have dinner one night, and we'll just go and we'll be like, oh, let's, check out some books, see if there's anything interesting to get. And there's always teens just like walking around, like looking through stuff. It's like manga and like light novels and things like that. But I'm curious as to, you already were reading, you already were interested in writing and poetry and things like that, but what made manga such an effective hook for you as a reader and as someone who is getting into comics?
One thing is that I did not have a lot of money growing up. I was a voracious reader, and I was the kind of kid who would rather, instead of eating lunch, I would save my lunch money, and there was a Barnes and Noble across the street. And I literally picked my high school, which I hated, partially because one, they gave me a scholarship, and two, because there was a Barnes and Noble across the street. But yeah, it was like an all girls Catholic school. That's a whole other. That I was president of the anime club at one point. It's all canon events, you know. But but the point is that yeah. So I didn't have a lot of money. So being in Barnes and Noble and like buying a Starbucks drink and then being able to hang out there for hours afterwards is like a good no money activity. You know what I mean? I think that that's why you keep seeing it. It's because like teenagers don't have a lot of money. They have basically enough to buy enough snacks to feed themselves because they're always hungry and to like kind of hang out in places. And most places do not want teenagers or young people there, so they shoo them off. But a bookstore is a place where you can hang out with your friends and be there for a while and not spend a lot of money. So I think that that's kind of, and especially like, I think I mentioned in other interviews too, but there was a comic shop called Galaxy Comics that was a block away from my house. And the manager at the time used to let me go in the back room and read whatever I wanted because he knew that I genuinely couldn't afford it. And he knew that I was also spending whatever free money I had at the comic shop anyway. So he's not going to be like, okay, well, you picked up volume one of this. You can't afford volume two. Just go read volume two in the back. You know what I mean? And that's how I got like most of my comics education. So I think that that's the thing is that you need, it is a probably a popular origin because, you know, you need those spaces. And for manga, I think for me specifically, it was just like how big it was. Like, oh my God, it was just like, like the emotions were always so huge, and I'm always a person who's felt my emotions very big. So I think that like, and also the fantasy worlds were so like weird and interesting. Like I was a huge Naruto fan. I was like a really lonely kid who would spend a lot of time imagining going into the Naruto realm, or like, you know, what would I be like as a ninja there? Well, I'd probably get along with people, blah blah blah, because I can't get along with people in real life. So like, you know what I mean? It's kind of just this manga provided kind of this big space for me to have big feelings and to imagine myself as this outcast like Naruto, to finding a way to like become the strongest, that my heart is big enough to kind of surpass the fact that I suck as a ninja. You know what I mean? That's kind of like it's all that. It's all kind of just big feelings. It's all just big feelings, I think.
It is interesting. I love the fact that we're back to emo already. But I mean, that's that's one of the things that I think is really powerful, and part of the reason why like manga and anime is so impactful is it is like so filled with like emotion. Like my wife is watching My Hero Academia right now, and like that show is basically like each episode of like everyone I come across when she's watching it is like an extended fight scene, basically where like the main character is like narrating for like 15 straight minutes about how he can't do it, but he's going to find the strength inside himself to do it. And it's funny how that works, where it's like, it isn't even about like necessarily the action. It's about like overcoming and the emotions that are tied to these things that make it, I think, such a impactful story in a lot of ways.
I mean, they're also just, I feel like a lot of manga stories were just like kind of long and longer and bigger and very like detailed and like kind of world buildy in a super like nitpicky way. I mean, I think about what a huge impact Full Metal Alchemist has had on me, for example, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think about like how, without FMA, there is no Squire, I don't think, you know what I mean? So like I just wasn't seeing that anywhere else, you know?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny. I feel like Full Metal Alchemist, if it hits the right person at the right time, it's going to be really impactful. Like I did this interview with Faith Erin Hicks, the cartoonist, and that was one of the big ones for her, where she was like the action scenes and just like the characters and everything like that. It was a really big influence on her, both as a reader and as a creator, because just the way it's done and the cartooning
Yeah.
that's done in it. I just want to bring up really quick. I read an interview where you talked about how like you kind of had found your way into manga, at least in part because of Toonami, and like one of the shows you
Yeah.
watched was Inuyasha, and
Yes.
Inuyasha I had never seen before until this past December when I was in San Antonio visiting my wife's family. And my wife and my niece and myself, we were all laying on a bed watching a bunch of Inuyasha over and over, just episode after episode on Crunchyroll. And
Nice.
it was interesting to see how like a 9-year old and like a 39-year-old and like a 44-year-old could like find this like complete overlap of interest in this one story, that it isn't like a children's story or it isn't like an adult story. It isn't anything. It's just like this wild story
It's
about
just
this girl in this
weird.
world with this weird dude who's
Dog
got
demon dude.
dog
Like
demon dude. Yeah.
it's just so weird and like yeah no and you know what, that brings up a good point that like manga had such cuter and hotter dudes like than like and like and women too, I'll say it, like as a queer person I was like everyone in manga was so like wild looking and also like so hot like like in a way that I was not seeing anywhere else either.
Well, I mean, it's like when I did that interview with Faith, we talked about Naoki Urasawa's Monster, which is a comic we both loved. And the funny thing we were talking about it is like the way that Urasawa did the serial killer in that book. We're just like, it's a very attractive serial killer. You're just like connected with this serial killer. It's just like, I know he's a bad guy, but man, looks really good when he's doing it. He's just
I
such.
fully.
It's like Howl from Howl's Moving Castle.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I was gonna say Shishomaru. Like, what a horrible. I loved it. I was like, I'll do anything for you. He's a monster. Anyway.
How do you feel that early manga love carried forward for you? I mean, clearly it was a major influence on both you and Sarah on Squire. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like that love shows up in your work regularly? Like, it seems just based off of the emo and off of like some of the character stuff that goes into Confetti Realms that it's present there, probably.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that kind of that manga influence is probably going to be in everything I do because I love manga and anime so much. I just because it's been part of my life as like a reader for so long. It's still very much something like I still read like manga. And in terms of influence on my stuff, I think that I always write. I realized the longer I write that like I started writing just because when I was a kid, I was having a lot of really hard times, and I was having a really hard time understanding why hard times were happening. So I would go into fiction, but sometimes I would just need to recontextualize the worst aspects of my life into fiction, into a way that I could like experience catharsis in a way that I couldn't in the real world, right? And I think that that hasn't really changed at all. I think that like when I write, it is still like a very, very personal, singular, like I am writing from my experience. I think that what makes it interesting is actually taking that and bringing in with someone else, which is why I like collaboration so much. Like Confetti Realms could not exist without my artist and co-creator Carnessa, whose artistic sensibilities are the things that pushed me into those ideas. Like the whole time was like, what could I get Carnessa to draw? What could I get Carnessa to do? What would Carnessa like to do? Like, I bet Carnessa would kill this, like, so that's kind of, I think that that's the thing is that like, whenever I write, it is still like I am reflecting my world and my kind of worldview, and I'm doing it for me. But the thing that kind of makes it interesting enough to go out there is how that, synthesizes with someone else's experience and vision
Mm-hmm.
and art.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Summer is in full swing and things are getting hot on Zoop. August is the time for mini launches, including, ironically enough, the book called August by Benjamin Morse, also an anthology from Stack Deck Press, Tony Gregori's Pork Chop Robot Killer, and the end of Glenn Bray's scrapbook campaign. And around the corner in September is Howard Chaykin's first foray into crowdfunding. There's so much more on the horizon, so stay tuned for updates. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up for Zoop, and the e-commerce style checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. And of course, the creators appreciate your support. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop is currently open for submissions. Email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start a campaign. And now, back to the show. I actually think it's funny that you brought up like the personal connection and like how your feelings kind of get into the book, because you have one of my favorite comic book origin stories I've ever come across, in the sense that you weren't necessarily interested in working in comics until you found out that your neighbor when you were a kid had said that he had an internship at Marvel Comics, and you basically wanted one out of spite.
Yes.
And you owe your career to some degree to the glorious powers of spite. Is that true?
Absolutely. I think I owe a lot of my career to the glorious power of spite. I think spite cannot power you entirely. You will burn out on that, and I know that from experience. But I will say that, like, oh boy, it really does motivate me to do things.
It's like a 5-hour energy.
It is like exactly. It's like a good cup of coffee. It really just kind of sets you right over the edge to get where you need to go.
Yeah. I hope that we're the first people who have ever compared spite to 5-hour energy or coffee. I feel like this is a first for humanity right now.
I mean, I hope it is. I hope people don't live like this.
But I mean, it is interesting though, because it's like, I think sometimes like we romanticize the idea of like origin stories of like how you break in and all these things like that. But sometimes it's like little things that push you in the right direction, not necessarily for the right reasons, not necessarily for the wrong reasons, but for a reason. And then next thing you know, you're at Marvel and you're an editorial internship and you're learning about how comics actually work, and you're finding that you might want to make this as a career. But I'm curious as to the things you learned during that time, because history is dotted with people who started as Marvel publisher interns and ended up in comics or in comics at said publisher. That isn't necessarily, I mean, you are in comics, but you're not at Marvel necessarily. I mean, you did write a book for Scholastic Graphics in Marvel, but
yes.
What were the biggest things you learned during those internships? And like, how did they help you better recognize comics as a viable career path for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that you're totally right. So for the people who don't know, the kind of the way that I entered comics is that I was a longtime reader. I used to go to, and I used to so manga and then comic shop, where actually I read mostly like zines and like local zines and stuff. And then finally that manager was like, hey, you should I think there are some superhero comics you'll like, and then handed me a few. Kingdom Come by Mark Waid was one of them, and Marvels by Kurt
Busiek and Alex Ross.
Busiek. Yes, that was the other one that were kind of like my intros to kind of superhero Cape Comics. What I learned at the internship was, I learned how many people actually work on a comic, which is so many, especially like the Marvel kind of format, where you've got like your writer, you've got sometimes pencils, inks, letters, and you see how many hands that a book passes through in order to get out. And I realized that, one of the first things I realized that was really exciting for me was just like how many different ways you could actually be involved in a comic, that it's so much more than just like writing. At first, I didn't really even think about writing. I just kind of wanted to be an editor. And that's, personal stuff of like, I thought that I wasn't good enough and so on. So I was like, I'm going to help people who are good enough. But I still love editing. But I guess the point there is that like I learned how many ways you could be involved. I learned the structure of a comic. I saw comic scripts. I saw like all the different stages of a comic in development. I learned how hard it was. I saw, like the editorial assistants who are often the ones who are giving me kind of the like my tasks to do and stuff were there later than I was very often. You know what I mean? Like it was, I kind of just saw the reality of it and seeing kind of all the nitty gritty details just made me fall in love with it more. Like I had known that I wanted to be involved in publishing in some kind of way, but it was, and I had done internships, like I had talked to literary agents and I had talked to like publishing houses, but weirdly, like the place that I got had the most like, oh man, this is really exciting actually. The intersection of like, kind of images and text and also just kind of the way that it moves through all of these people to become a whole thing is so amazing and magical. It's just so collaborative that I was like, this is the thing that I really am the most excited about is kind of, I don't want to be in a tower writing by myself. I do want to be actively working with other people while being creative. So
I do think that that is one of the values of having experience like that is if you only write or you only draw or something like that, I'm not saying that you can't succeed or something like that, but it does help you better understand kind of, for lack of better terms, the machine you exist within and like how
yeah.
it all works and what is necessary to make this happen. I imagine like doing a book market book or like a creator owned book or something like that is made easier by that knowledge because it helps you understand the things that need to happen, all the different parts and pieces that need to be executed to make sure that this happened. I mean, perfect example. You organized an anthology called Corpus, which
I
was
was going to bring it up. Yeah, I was going to say that that was definitely part of the learning experience because Corpus came about because actually, so I did my Marvel internship. I got my first publishing job, which I hated. It was in a sales department in, the massive PRH bubble in one of their imprints, and it was awful. And I actually interviewed for a Marvel editorial job during that time, and I didn't get it. And I was so devastated. I was so floored. And I was like, what do I do? And then that was around the same time that we were first starting to have the talks about like, oh, what if we get rid of Obamacare? So that's when I kind of was like, okay, I need to do this big all or nothing thing of like, I'm going to organize this massive thing and I'm going to make it happen or I'm going to quit comics forever because I was like 23 or 24 at the time and very melodramatic.
you were listening to a lot of emo music at the time.
Oh, I was, but I still am. But the point is that I guess I was like, so with Corpus, it was like the Marvel editorial internship and then Corpus, which was the first thing I did, which required me to like organize people, edit people, get a book printed, manage Kickstarter, mail them out. Like I kind of baptized myself by fire without meaning to.
My comparison was you went from college to grad school.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I have to go big. I have to go big. And and I did.
I mean, I have to admit, looking back on the creative team or like all the creators that are on that book, it's kind of insane because I mean, like this was Rom V before Rom V was like the writer of Detective Comics and the writer
Yeah.
of a book that like sells in every country and like wins Eisner Awards, like The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, and then Vita Ayala and Teenie Howard and Caspar Wingard and etc. Alex Packnadel. You keep going down the list and you're like, Corpus is just like filled with like the next generation of stars, basically, which is pretty crazy.
I mean, it was me really just going. I went to New York Comic Con with flyers I had made, and I gave them to literally every human being in Artist Alley who would speak to me. I think I gave one to Tom King. I gave one to Frank Miller. I
I love it.
I like and for no, I did not that I even thought anything was going to happen. I was just like, I was just such a social, I still am very socially anxious, but I was like, I got in this headspace that I was like, all right, if I want to make this happen, it's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. So I put like my entire soul in being like, you submit to Corpus.
I just
you know?
imagine you like going up to whoever the biggest celebrity was, like Chris Evans is there, and you're like, "There's a place for you here if you want it, Chris."
I swear to God, no.
In
And it
Corpus.
wasn't even, I wish it was like that because it was worse because it was me sitting there being like, hey, I'm going to sit you down for like 5 to 10 minutes, and I'm a new person you've never met before, but I'm going to tell you about this, and I am going to give you this flyer, and then I hope I hear from you. So I just went, like, people just watched me. I swear to God, I think go from like table to table, just giving this pitch, this like heartfelt pitch about Corpus. I became friends with a lot of people be that way. I'm good friends with Vita Ayala. And it's funny, Vita likes to say that they said yes to Corpus because I came up to them like I knew them, and they thought that we knew each other and that they had forgotten me. So they were like, "Sure, I'll take this flyer, of course,"
Yeah, best
because
friend.
they were embarrassed.
Hey, you know what? I have one of my best friends is a person that I met in a bar, and she came up to me. She's like, "Hey!" And then we pretended to be best friends for like 30
Uh-huh.
consecutive minutes, and then next thing you know, we're actually friends. And like we never
That's
met ever. So
Yeah, it
Vita and you,
happens.
it happens exactly. You just got to be open.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that it was a very 23-year-old, 24-year-old on the brink move of being like, I gotta do this big thing. And I was looking specifically, it's funny that I say like, oh, I gave one to Tom King, I gave one to Frank Miller. But the truth was is that I was looking specifically for people who had done independent stuff who like I liked their work. Like I spit, so that's kind of it is cool. I really feel very proud about the list that I was able to put together because it is a lot of people who are my peers now who weren't at the time and who I approached before they were my peers, and I approached them just because I liked them, and yeah, they continued to kick ass. It was very cool.
Well, and I have to say, the going table to table thing, even if you don't know you or think that you know you in the case of Vita, I do think that people respect having the gumption to do something like that. And it shows that you have a lot of passion.
Yeah.
You're not going up there and just being like, "You're welcome. You can join this if you want." You're just like sharing why this means something to you and why that you would love for them to participate. And I think people value that sort of thing. But also, I do think that people underrate the value of anthologies just because I think that while they don't do well in the direct market of comics, they're actually a pretty incredible way for new creators to get their foot in the door, and
Totally.
also something that does really well in manga. I mean, like, look at Shonen Jump, and then also does
Yeah.
really well in crowdfunding. It's interesting how, I don't know, sometimes in comics we like boil things down to sales too much and we don't think about the actual value for it. But for like anthologies are a great way for creators to find themselves. They're a great way for the organizer to find what they really want to do. They're just very effective gateway tools, but also like tools for a certain audience who wants something different. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that's part of the reason why Corpus ended up being such a success is that you offered something that people really wanted.
Yeah, I mean, as a type 1 diabetic and lifelong disabled person, I definitely like I knew that other people had to have some kind of feelings like I was of kind of experience and frustration. I did not expect by any means how big the response was going to be. Even people who did apply or yes, like I think at first I was like, it's going to be like a little 100-page anthology, ended up being like 300 pages full color because and like oh boy, I lost a ton of money on shipping too. But like the point is that I wanted it to be like the thing that was like, hey, this is me as a creator. This is my introduction to the comics community as a creator. And it's me putting together this thing. Weirdly, because of Corpus, I gained the confidence to actually try writing again, which kind of brings us where we are now.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too far into Squire because if we talk about Squire, I'm just gonna. I mean, I have it right next to me. I would just go on for the rest of the podcast about it. But
Next time.
yeah, exactly. I love it. It's you and Sarah Alpha G. It's God, was it Harper Alley? Harper Alley, yeah, Harper
Yes.
Alley book, and it is absolutely fantastic. The thing that I think is really interesting about it is, as a project, it's like people really like labels and they really like thinking about how attribution works in terms of like, oh, you're the writer, Sarah's the artist. That from the outside does not strike me as an accurate description. While you did write the script and Sarah did draw the book, it seems like a lot of it, like the concepting side and the development, was really you. I mean, you two talking on the phone. You,
Definitely.
I read it in the back of the book. You talk about how a lot of it was you guys going out to eat together, and instead of eating, you plotted directly on tablecloths.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's for a pair of people who, from what I understand, met over Twitter DMs. What
Hmm.
was it about? What is it about that collaboration that just works?
I mean, I think that yeah, so it's funny like we did meet over Twitter DMs. It was while I was doing Corpus, and Sarah had just done Boy Bye, I think was the name of her Kickstarter project. And we just kind of did that Spider-Man pointing meme thing of seeing just two young Arab women in comics being like, "Oh, it's you!" Like, because it's just like we hadn't seen it before or anyone. And I think that when we talked, finally, like Sarah reached out to me to be like, hey, I'm looking for a collaborator to do a book. The first thing we talked about was our mutual like influences, like what were the things that we loved growing up. And when we made sure that we established like, hey, we do have mutual interests, not only in like what we liked, but what we currently want to talk about. That's kind of what made it, I think, made it good. Is I think that you're right that like it's not, I think that the whole writer artist thing, like that delineation is always weird because when you do comics, you're both co-creators, you're both kind of ideating and like creating the world, like the artist is translating your work into visuals. It's not, writer artist, it's like yes, that is what we ended up doing to make the final product, but everything else was really hand in hand. So like I think I try now to use the word co-creator rather than like artist or illustrator. I try to like just, co-create it, like because I think that that's a better way to phrase it.
I like that in the book, it doesn't actually even have delineation of roles. It just says your names.
Yeah.
That is a very nice and simple implication that it wasn't as simple as like some people would necessarily think. It was really
Yeah.
you two riffing and you two finding the right answers together.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, we kind of like we spent so much time together building the world that when it came time to separate, we just kind of both knew what we needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. And then like there was a lot of spaces where Sarah would just message me, be like, I want to change this scene and make it like 10 pages longer. And I'm like, sure. Like I don't it's just kind of just like, yeah, why not? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, and it's you two finding the right answers together. And if Sarah thinks that that's the right answer, then take that path.
Yeah, basically it's like sure, like I think that I try to trust my artists very much. I try to see my scripts as kind of like a conversation,
Yeah.
like it takes the place of me. I put reference links directly in the scripts. I often directly say like, oh, I'm thinking this, I don't know, Sarah, maybe this. And then I'll put like, oh, I'll be like, hey Sarah, do you remember that scene in Princess Mononoke? Here's the scene. I'm thinking like this is the vibe. You know what I mean? Like like that's kind of, I care more about the pacing and the emotionality more than what happens panel to panel. You know what I mean?
I kind of think that that's like a manga thing to some degree almost,
Yes.
where like it feels like, I mean, I'm not saying that Western comics don't have this, but manga has the space to have more deliberate pacing than like a 20
Yeah.
issue monthly or 20 page
Yes.
monthly.
Totally. It's a totally different. It's funny because it's like you're right. We talk about them as they're the same and they're completely different skill sets. They're completely different like languages of comics, kind of the book market and versus direct market. Like it's a whole different set of skills. I think that comics writing is very complicated and kind of in a way that people don't actually really recognize, which is I think really where we get problems in the comics market about like not, how do I put it, like quality control
Sure.
issues of people not maybe understanding that there is so much skill that goes into understanding comics and learning how to write for that medium specifically. Like I think visually. I try to think visually. I say this a lot, but for Squire, I thumbnailed my own script as well, and I did that for a while. And I have tried to draw my own comic scripts, not even to like make it a thing, but kind of to understand what it is that I'm asking to happen on a page or like in a scene. I think that like if you are a comics writer, you also do need to understand the medium visually. It's pretty, yeah, it's very important to me.
I've talked to artists who have said things like, and like this isn't them picking on writers or anything
Mhm.
like that, but sometimes like writers will put something in the script that is physically not possible to depict in like a single panel where it's like,
Yeah,
oh, this person does this and this. And it's like, well, you can't have two actions unless like it's one arm and one arm doing different things and, or like perspectives that just aren't possible. I do have to ask, this is jumping ahead, but did you put a note into the script to Carnessa for Confetti Realms that the bird folk should look like Hal from when he's like half
I
bird?
did not put that note in, but Carnessa is a very, very brilliant nerd. So I believe that she put that in herself.
Okay, I was gonna say because when I came across that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm liking this.
Yeah, no, it is very that. And also, there is like an actual bird woman in Russian mythology who
Oh,
looks like that.
okay.
And I literally was like, yeah, so this is what this thing is. It's this little Russian bird thing.
I love it. It is interesting. I was actually so the funny thing is when I did my prep for this interview, I had done it on the strength of having read up until the cast of Confetti Realms goes to Confetti Realms. I hadn't read the rest of it. Last night I
Mm-hmm.
read the rest of it. And it's interesting because like in the process, I was like 100% certain that Squire is your most personal project to date. But the interesting thing is like now having read the rest of the story, I mean, the idea of any project being your most personal is kind of a tricky one just because I imagine everything you do to some degree has you in it. There's no
Yeah.
less personal. It's like even when you're writing about Talia al Ghul for like Shadow Warzone, it's like there's
Yeah.
probably some of you in there in a way that might be not as obvious as Confetti Realms or Squire, but it's there nonetheless.
1000%. Yeah. I do think that I am just one of those writers who cannot not put myself like into my work. It's kind of whether it be work for hire and even kind of the work for hire projects I try to take are specifically because there's something in that I want to kind of talk about and reflect. And often it is something that I have either experienced myself or it's something that I've seen and I want to work out. I think so every project always has something that I'm dealing with.
I mean, your project mix is pretty interesting. I mean, you've had Squire, a graphic novel at Harper Alley. I should say Harper Alley Quill Tree. It's a imprint. There's so many distinctions.
I know.
You've worked in a number of anthologies, including the ones we've talked about. You wrote Ms. Marvel Stretched Thin, a graphic novel for the Marvel Scholastic Graphics. I always combine Scholastic and graphics into Scholastics, which makes no
I
sense.
mean, but I get it.
Yeah, you have Confetti Realms coming at Maverick. You're a writer on Thirsty Suitors, a video game that we're going to talk about in a little bit. It's quite the mix. I am interested in it sounds like you're very intentional about what you look for. Like you weren't just looking to get a graphic novel. You got Ms. Marvel, a character
Mm-hmm.
that you have narrative overlap with. You have a
Yeah.
connection with. It seems like when you are going from project to project, is it more about you choosing to go in certain directions or is it more about opportunity? Like how do you balance those two sides?
I think it's a combo of both. Yeah. I think that it's kind of opportunities and what I want to do next. So, like stuff like Ms. Marvel, it's like if I see an opportunity at Marvel or DC, I will specifically go for the thing that I want to go. And if it's a character I'm not interested in, I'm not probably going to do it. Or if it's a character that I can't find something interesting that I want to talk about specifically, or if I feel like I'm not the right person. I try to be really intentional. It's hard because it's a combo of like, I need to survive. Obviously, it takes a lot of money to survive, especially as a type 1 diabetic. But I also don't want to do stuff I regret. And I don't want to like I can't fake it. I'm just not that kind of person. I am very passionate and emotion driven. And so as a result, I just have to like, I have to, the project has to, yeah, it has to feel right. It's like either something comes or I get like this big wave of energy that I'm like, no, I need to find the next thing and I need to make it be this, and then I will then kind of push to make that happen. I mean, the Dead by Daylight comics is actually one of those examples where I was playing Dead by Daylight a lot during the pandemic, and then I was like, oh man, it would be really fun to do a comic. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, that's actually true. It would be fun to do a comic. And then I asked my agent to find out who has the rights. I found out it was Titan. And then I basically was like, hey guys, can I do a comic? And I sent pitches. And then I didn't hear anything. And then finally they were like, okay, yeah, I got approved. And I was like, oh, cool. So yeah, but so like, yeah, so sometimes it's like that. And sometimes it is like Marvel reaching out to you being like, oh, we're interested in the Scholastic books. And I'm like, hey, Ms. Marvel, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Opportunities will pass you by unless you make, I don't know, like sometimes you have to make the opportunities for yourself, like the Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, my dad, so I grew up I grew up in Brooklyn. My dad was a small business owner. He owns a window shade company where he manufactures and installs shades for schools primarily in New York, the tri-state area. So my dad is like a very complicated caricature in many ways. But the big thing is that he's a hustler. He's like a small business owner. He's like an Arab Brooklyn dad. He's a Tony Soprano type. Like he would, have me like introduce myself to his business meetings as the next president of American Window Fashions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like very Talia al Ghul here, but like you know what I mean. The point is that there's a lot of there was a lot of education of kind of like, hey, business is a personal thing, like it's still you, like if you at the end of the day, like I guess you're managing yourself, like you have to take care of yourself, you have to always go out and find the next job, you have to be like very self-motivated. I think that those things are good and bad in lessons, but that I think they definitely affected the way that I go after my career. I try to be very proactive.
I do think, too, the other thing about taking jobs that aren't necessarily fits for you is it puts you in a position where readers might read something from you where it doesn't feel right and they know it doesn't feel right because of that. And it's like that can impact how you're perceived. Like you can read Confetti Realms or Squire and know that this is something you're very passionate about. But if it was like, I don't know, doing a Super Mario Brothers adaptation, I don't know, maybe you'd be super jacked about that. But
no, but like, yeah, let's just say whatever. Like the point is let's say I hated Super Mario Brothers, and I'm like, no, it would be
yeah, I'm anti-mustache. I can't hang with these guys.
Yeah, exactly. I can't. No. Yeah.
Well, okay, so just to give a quick spiel on Confetti Realms, it's your upcoming graphic novel with artist Carnessa and colorist Takuto Oshiro for Mad Cave's Maverick line of young adult graphic novels. I'm going to do the solicit really quick. On Halloween night, when the moon is full, teenagers get up to mischief. But when an encounter with a giant sentient puppet, which is just a really fantastic line, in a graveyard sends 4 teens to a mysterious dimension called the Confetti Realms, they must overcome obstacles in their own friendships and collect the deaded teeth owed to the puppet in order to make their way home. But the allure of staying in a fantasy world is a hard one to beat, and going home to their normal lives is starting to sound less and less appealing for some. Will these friends return home? I mentioned before I had like the 2 separate halves reading in 2 separate chunks. And when I originally was thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to describe it as a fun book. It is a fun book, but it becomes something a lot more. And I thought it was interesting, both on the podcast, but also in your write-up for the press release, you described it as a deeply personal story for you and a world I needed to make for myself during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I guess besides the emo of it all that we discussed earlier, why was this story so personal and important to you?
Well, I think that, during the pandemic, you're stuck inside, and I also made a lot of major life changes during the life pandemic. Like I moved to Toronto. I left my parents' house for the first time. I for tried to basically become a writer for the full first time in 2020 because I was immunocompromised and I could no longer work service jobs. So it's kind of like there was a lot changing, and I felt really tumultuous. And I think, like a lot of people, I lost contact with a lot of people who were once close to me. And I think that, when you have nothing but time and you're feeling your worst, like it's hard to kind of reach out and communicate, or reach out to even be like, hey, haven't talked for a while. How are you? And I think that, yeah, Confetti Realms was kind of like this place where I got to maybe, in my saddest moments, look at the relationships that I felt like had failed and been like, what do I make of this? What can I say about this? And, so I think that, this is a story about like kids going in a fantastical world and figuring themselves out, but it's very much also about kind of like relationships and like the way that we kind of grow distant from one another without intending to. I think that Confetti Realms was really goofy and also like really hopeful for me in a way that I find to struggle with maybe sometimes with other books, because my other books often they deal with like these big structures. They deal with imperialism and colonialism and self-identification and a harsh world and people trying to make it together in a harsh world. But Confetti Realms is not a harsh world. It's in fact a pretty nice world, like a scary world.
Pretty friendly monster adjacent people.
Yeah, friendly and terrifying. Friendly, like a kind but weird world. Like, it's then, they say like kind, not nice. That's Confetti Realms. It's not nice, but it is kind, and it is the place where these kids can kind of decompress about their feelings and heal a little.
I feel like in some ways, to make another unnecessary music reference, maybe it's less of an emo book and more of a power pop book, in the sense that it's like about the sad feelings you have, but also figuring out that there's answers to those. So it's like, It's less the early November and more like, I don't know, Newfound Glory or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a really good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
But it's interesting though, because it does have this tonal balance where there's like these big feelings that come with being a teenager, but there's also like signs that say things like, and I quote, atrocities of an amphibian nature, which is just spectacular. I absolutely loved it. It's interesting to see you kind of walk that line, and it works really well. But I have to say, for both the books we've talked about, primarily Squire and Confetti Realms, I was sold very quickly on specific things. Squire, I knew I wanted to read it, and I knew I was going to like it based off of Sarah's cover. I think that cover is spectacular. The thing that I knew I would like Confetti Realms is that the first scene takes place in a diner and has the teenagers sitting around eating food, breakfast actually at night, and having a discussion about black coffee. And as soon as I got there, I was like all the way in.
No, that is, yeah, no, I've spent quite a number of nights eating breakfast at diner as a teenager. That first chapter of Confetti Realms was basically just like a typical teenage night, except no cars because we were in Brooklyn. We just walked everywhere. But like, yes, I may or may not have broken into a cemetery to drink.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Do you wish that buying and reading digital comics was even easier? Well, I have good news. Omnibus is here for you. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. They're pay per book, just like your LCS, but digital, so you're already used to the experience. Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today on board. Want to find the right digital comic shop for you? Download Omnibus today on the Apple App Store to do just that. And now, back to the show. I was just recounting a story to my wife about when I was in Prague and I was trying to find this rave that was apparently happening.
Hmm.
And these people I was with were convinced that the entrance was in a cemetery. And I'm like, I don't think that this is true, but I will go with you and we can find out it was not there. There was
That's
nothing.
so funny. And that's so good. Yeah, no. So I like, in fact, there's a this is pretty early in Confetti Realms, so I won't consider it a spoiler, but when the cops show up and they're like, we should make you chug this entire thing as punishment, like that is a line for line a thing a cop said to me.
Why is it that like teenagers get these like inventive like answers from cops?
No.
They're like, instead of
Brilliant.
arresting you, I'm going to make you chug this bottle of vodka and then you're going to really learn your lesson. I'm like, I don't think you can legally do that. I think what you're doing is a crime.
Yeah, yeah. He was like, "Ah, we should make you chug this." To then he was like, "Get out of here!" And then I went and drank at a diner instead. Like, you know what I mean? Like you put it, you just all of a sudden that coffee has vodka in it. But yeah, no. So very dirtbag teens, very much the kids that I hung out with. So like. And it was very nice to do this. God, I love you doing emo stories. I want to do more. They're fun.
I think it's funny though because I just rewatched Dazed and Confused for some reason. I think it was just because I haven't seen it in
Nice.
forever, and I was rewatching it, and I told my wife that I had a realization. It's just like the thing that unites all teenagers is that we're always bored and looking for something to do.
Yep. No, it's so true.
Yeah, and like that's kind of like what like they're like, oh yeah, let's go do this thing because it's Halloween and because we're out of pancakes and let's do it. And then
Yeah.
next thing you know, uh-oh,
Uh-oh.
puppets sent us to another realm.
Oh no.
Classic.
Oh my God.
I have to ask though, where do you stand on black coffee? Disgusting or life giving?
Life-giving.
Oh,
I
so
mean, okay,
gross.
here's the
I
thing.
can't do it.
I'm gonna say life-giving for not me because I'm a baby and I put milk in my coffee. But I know, but I do respect you black coffee drinkers. You're all cooler than me. You can have my lunch money.
I'm currently drinking a caramel Americano with steamed half and half that I made myself. And
Yeah,
so
after this, I'm absolutely making myself a nice latte for sure.
So just a few more questions on this. I did want to ask about the cast. There's a quartet of
Yes.
teens, Marissa, Radwa, Ty, and Garrett. Each is different. Each has their own strengths and challenges. And like, I do like that, A, they split up so you can kind of get a different feel for their collaborations and how they work together. And B, one of them makes a reference about how Scream tells us that we shouldn't do this because that is a fact. I mean, both the fact that you shouldn't split up and also the fact that Scream said that. They
Yep.
balance each other out really well, but what made them the right leads for this book in your mind?
I mean, that's a really good question because I feel like, yeah, I knew there were going to be four of them from the start.
There's like an alchemy there.
Yeah, I don't know. I like groups of four. I feel like I like groups of four. But yeah, so like I feel like they're kind of like each one has their own relationship to one another, but each one has like the one that they're closest to in one specific way.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I kind of like felt like they needed to be characters that balance each other out in the fact that they had close relationships with someone in the group, but there was someone else in the group that they more accurately emotionally aligned with than the person they were closest with. Because I think that's yeah, like I think that your moods are always changing when you're young and it all just feels big and huge. So I think that like, and it's hard to trust yourself with those emotions. And it's funny because I feel like I'm talking about a lot of big emotions, but I think the thing that I am proudest of is I think Confetti Realms is the funniest book I've ever written.
Oh, it's very funny.
It is a horror comedy for sure.
I take notes when I read books for interviews, and it's not very often that I take a note about a background sign and a specific line about the frog's crimes. So that was very good.
That frog is, I really love that frog.
Was it Bitter Hops?
It's Bitter Hops. His name is Bitter Hops.
The entire bar scene, I don't want to get too much further into like the details, but like there's a bar scene that features a lot of anthropomorphic animals, and like when that door opens and just like Ty's reaction to things is just very great because it's just
Yeah.
there's a gung ho different type of 5 hour energy to Ty.
Oh yeah, no. Ty is in their element. Ty is a non-binary goth who like is the only one there, I think, who is like, this is the best day of my life. I've been yeah.
I feel like I'm a dead center mix between Ty and Garrett. I don't know why. I was reading it and I was like, who do I profile as? I'm like, probably those two. So you worked with Carnessa on this. It was the
I
artist on the
did.
book, and she wasn't someone I'd read before.
No.
But she does a heck of a job, and also really, really likes horror things. I was
Oh
looking
yeah.
through some of her stuff on her site, so she is an apt fit. But you talk about how collaboration is really important to you.
Mhm.
What made her the right fit for this story in your mind?
Yeah, Carnessa was definitely my first pick for this story because I was like, hey, I know. So Carnessa is someone that I know actually through my partner. She is a cartoonist who I really loved her work for a while. But the thing is, she balanced like these really incredible cartoony like facial expressions and these like really fun, like funny kind of character moments against extreme horror, which is like really fascinating to me. So I kind of really wanted to channel that. I wanted this to be like a really weird and unsettling world, and like like on the brink of uncomfortable, but and I knew that Carnessa could bring that like the comedy as well as like really take it there, take it to the weird, and she is so deep. So Carnessa is obsessed with bugs, specifically centipedes, to the extent where if I see anything centipede related, I send it to her. Like I and yes, so like as a result, I the whole time I was like, I need to get as weird as Carnessa. I need to like get on Carnessa's level. So it kind of I feel like it did definitely push me to be like, I know what this person can do. I want to really like match them in terms, and I want them to have fun because Carnessa like hasn't, I think this is Carnessa's maybe first like full book with another person. I think that, so I really wanted it to be like, we knew each other already, but I wanted her to actually enjoy the work she was working on because I know that she is even more particular than I am about the stuff that she likes to do. She's a real perfectionist.
Yeah, it's funny when I was looking through her stuff on her site. I think there were several books with centipedes on there, and I was like, "This adds up with Confetti Realms." There's
Yeah, no, she loves bugs. It's there. I think like one of the first times that I was like, okay, I know that you're the Confetti Realms artist. She sent me a meme that just had a bunch of bugs. It was literally an image of a bunch of bugs, and then she was like, if they're cold, if you're cold, they're cold. Put them in your mouth. And I was like, okay,
that line is in the book, isn't it?
I don't think so. I
There's
don't
like a
know.
line that's close to it.
I think so.
It
Maybe there
involves
is. I
teeth,
don't even.
though. It involves
Oh
teeth.
yeah. Okay. Well, that was an intrusive thought that I had once, where I was like, how horrible would it be to chew on teeth? And
It'd be very bad.
yeah, and I kept thinking about it, and I did put that line in the book. I was like, that was just a really bit intrusive thought I had that I was like, that has to go in there. You're right that Confetti Realms is in many ways like a way that I let loose in a way that I haven't before. I think in fiction, I definitely like just kind of was like, okay, I'm not going to care about. I'm not going to Full Metal Alchemist this, where everything kind of everything is building to something. Like I'm going to instead just kind of like have a good time and go with the flow. And I think that it's weird because it made a book that I think parallels Squire in a lot of ways, but in many ways is like its total opposite.
Hmm. I think it totally works. But I am curious as to, like, how do you decide where a book like this lands? Like, what made Maverick Mad Cave's YA line the right fit for this book? Like, did this start as a conversation with them, or did
Yes,
you
it
already?
did.
It did.
It started with a conversation with them. This was in 2020, where I was reached out to by, at the time, Chris Sanchez, who isn't there anymore, but definitely I want to shout him out because he helped get Confetti Realms like halfway through to where it, like at least halfway through production. If I remember the timeline correctly, I don't know what any time is, but he was the one who reached out to me first. And I really thought that he seemed like a pretty great editor. So I was like, okay. And he kind of gave me like, they gave me the title, and that was it. It was kind of like they gave me a vague, like the title, and they were like, hey, we were thinking this is the title we have, and we have some ideas of what it could be, but honestly, we're open to whatever you want to do. And then it kind of built out from there. As I was like, okay, what is Confetti Rounds? And I was like, it's a feeling. And I'm like, okay, what is like I wanted to capture that like kind of melancholy feeling of watching confetti fall down in slow motion, because it's that moment of like, while it's falling, it's beautiful, but the party's over in a second.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was like, that's Confetti Realms.
My God, I never would have guessed that its origin was like title. Here you go.
Yeah, I know.
I that is. I mean, talk about making you made some magic happen with that pitch because I'm taken aback. I'm blown away by this. This is crazy. But I mean, it makes sense. It really adds up for it. But I do. I want to talk, but before we go, I want to talk about just kind of like this kind of weird time right now in comics in a number of ways where
Yeah.
it's, I don't know, like a lot of creators, when you're trying to find the right home for your books, you're trying to find the right place to go. It can be really difficult for any number of reasons. It's like, how much do you want to keep your rights? Like, how much marketing support are you going to get? What's the production going to be like? What is all of these variables going to be like? Can I handle doing this all myself if that's the path I end up taking? You could, because you are adept and experienced at this sort of thing. But how does it feel from the inside? Does it feel like a weird time?
No, it feels like a weird time. It feels like a very weird time. I think that, yeah, I think comics is going through, I can't tell if it's like, you know, growing pains or what, but we're definitely I think in a moment of shift where a lot of the old structures are crumbling and are not, we're not really sure where that's going to go. And we're seeing a lot of, kind of the indie, like titans like Piao and Shortbox also kind of starting to shutter. And I think that, yeah, we're kind of in this moment where everything feels like it's retracting. But I think that when that's over, we're gonna something new will have to come inevitably, because kind of the spirit to create comics has nothing to do with the industry that it's in. So I do think that it's like a really weird moment to make comics as you're living. I think that we're all going to have to get really creative really soon about that. And I've been definitely thinking about it, about like, oh man, like I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. I don't even know how one markets their book anymore without, the like central social media. But, that time is over. The idea of Twitter as the water cooler of comics, it's over there. I don't think there's going to be another one. I think that we are going back to kind of more decentralized social media kind of little sites. And then it's like, okay, then what then? Do we do newsletter? Is it personal? I'm not really sure, but I definitely think that publishers are going to have to learn how to market books now with that, because before it was very much left up to us, the creators, to kind of do our own marketing and to make our own followings on social media. I think that, yeah, I think that it's a really weird and difficult and precarious time to be in comics from the inside. I think it's really scary, but that this is kind of a moment after which, like, one of two things can happen. And I am in the hopeful camp that, you know, it's not the end, but it's kind of the end of this, and we're entering a new beginning. Yeah.
One might call it a period of transfiguration.
Oh, ah.
A reference that you and I get, but nobody else does. But I've actually thought for a while that, I mean, not just like pre-pandemic, I kind of thought that it was like a period of transition where it's like comics is like a high schooler where they're trying to figure out what they're going to be when they grow up. And I don't know what that looks like. And it's a really tough thing to manage. I mean, like, that's the thing that it's really from the outside. It's like, how do you manage that? Is that part of the reason why you end up writing a video game, is because you need something with a little bit more stability?
Yeah, that is exactly the reason. You start looking at other industries and you say to yourself, like, and this is true for me, is that like I still have ongoing comics work, but I do not think that I will look for only comics moving forward. I think that I will probably be trying to work in other mediums as well, to kind of one, because I'm actually passionate about it and I love storytelling and I love finding different ways to tell stories, and specifically interactive stories. It's why I like comics, because there's like a level of readership interaction that is a little bit further than prose, in my opinion. But spicy. But ooh. But anyway, point is, sorry, I keep saying point is because I rant a lot. But I think that right now it's yeah, I think it's hard to do any one thing, but I think the gig economy has set it up that way. So we'll see.
We will see. I do have to say, I can't go too far into Thirsty Suitors because I've kept you for way too long, but I want to say that this game, which comes out in November, November 2nd, has turn based battles, skateboarding, and cooking, which
Yes.
I very much love that combination of things. I'm very into it. But I did want to ask, like I mentioned before, it might have been before we started recording. I do think it's funny how scheduling works out where you have these two releases that are coming out within like basically 2 weeks of one another. Confetti Realms comes out on October 17th. Thirsty Suitors drops on November 2nd. And like that, I'm sure has literally nothing to do with you that those are coming out when they're coming out. Nothing to do with you?
Nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with you. And yet, you're going to have your arguable two big projects for 2023 happening within this tight little window. Are you going to do anything to celebrate this big multi-week stretch? Like, are you going to go out and have a celebratory cup of black coffee or something?
Such a great question. I haven't thought about celebration or rest in many years now, but I will probably do so. Yeah, I probably do something. I'm like, I feel like what I do for fun now is ceramics and gardening, which isn't. So I'm like, I will maybe get a nice meal and like throw some bowls, yeah, and smoke some. Who knows?
Do you normally do something for yourself when a project is released, like a throw some bowls, like do something like that, or because like
not really.
I always find it really interesting, like creators like not to keep bringing up Faith Erin Hicks, but I remember when she finished her Nameless City trilogy, I'm pretty sure she played Breath of the Wild, and that was her like reward to herself.
Okay, I know that I have a lot of yeah. So that's God, it's so interesting. I think that when I finish a project and I get paid for it, I let myself buy like one big stupid purchase, like a really hype pair of sneakers, or like a really expensive sweatshirt, or like or like something like just something that I wanted that I'm like, this is a few $100s. I know that I should not spend a few $100s on this item. However, I did it. I wrote this whole book, or I wrote half this video game, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so that's what I do. It's like I'm like, I don't know what that purchase is gonna be. I bought a pair of sneakers once. I bought an Akira sweatshirt the other for Where Black Stars Rise, and I'm like, I don't know what's gonna be for Confetti Realms. It is funny because when you are a creator, and especially in comics and games, things take so long that you will sit there for like a year and you'll be like, God, I didn't do anything this year because nothing came out that like in that like 10-month stretch. You'll be like, I didn't put anything out. I haven't been doing anything. And then all of a sudden a month comes along where you have a video game and a book coming out, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I'm tired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like you just, because there's so much kind of constant like work, you just kind of forget that like that work actually goes somewhere and leads to something.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me when things like that happen. Like there's a cartoonist named Junie Ba who has, I think
I love Junie Ba's work.
Yeah, Junie Ba, amazing, has two different books coming out. And I think a 6-day span in October, like October 15th and the 21st. And they're both graphic novels, so which introduces several layers of questions. First off, how did you do that? Second off, why is that happening? And third off, how quickly can I get both of those books? But it's interesting how that works, where that stuff is completely out of your control. They're different publishers. They just kind of work out that way. But Junie Ba fans, super served. Fans of yours, super served. And we're going to be happy for it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's gonna be exciting. I haven't, Squire was my first book, and then Where Black Stars Rise came out that same year in October, which is nuts, and also had nothing to do with me. And yeah, so this is gonna be my 2023 thing, and then after that, who knows?
Throw some bowls, I guess.
Like I was like, I have stuff contracted. I just can't talk about them yet.
Of course. Well, I'm excited to find out whenever we do. But Nadia, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Confetti Realms, Squire, collaboration, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much. This was super fun. I'll be back anytime. You can't get rid of me now.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Nadia Shammas. You can find her and her work in the upcoming Confetti Realms at Mad Cave Maverick and the video game Thirsty Suitors. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at SketchComic or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Mike Cancel, Scott Place, Darcy Van Polges, Kevin Bides, Travis Schmeiser, Tom Evans, Natalie Mockery, Reed Beeman, Kelly Zudakonic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Hull, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Dorade, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Jingo Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damstead, Rom V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Subman Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Misell, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Nick Bennett, Birdcage Comics Cafe, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambank, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Philip Myrick, Chris Bachala, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Holy Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Yala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Nick Polito, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Carl McMahon, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Adam Highfield, Fiona Stables, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's outro and ad music just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.